on this computer.
There you go.
Make sure we get the little red dot at the top. I think I see that.
Yep.
All right, awesome. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you stuck around, and hopefully you had some great morning sessions this morning. I'm sure that you did. I know we had quite a variety of things. We're excited that you're experiencing this type of learning. So this afternoon, for the next hour or so, we're going to be taking a look at Google Classroom Beyond the Basics. As we talk to you throughout this time, we're going to dip a little bit every now and then back into the basics, just because we, of course, don't know for sure where you're coming from as far as your experience with Classroom. And we've also found that as much as we think we know, there's always something more to learn. So even if we show you something that is pretty basic, chances are somebody is still going to be like, oh man, that's just what happens. So Trace?
Hi, I'm Tracy Rains. I'm a virtual learning specialist at the IU. Brenda and I have been changing up our venue here. This is our third Bitmoji classroom. We started in an actual like classroomy thing, and then we went to, in July we were camping, and then now we're kind of back into an office setting, just going with the flow. In our usage of Google Classroom, we have found using the Bitmoji Classroom is nice to keep you present in an asynchronous environment.
And I am Brenda. I do educational technology, and I'm a Google certified trainer. Tracy and I have spent a lot of time with Google in the last few months, more so in the last several years, but these last couple months have just been really, really powerful. And we focus this conversation for the most part on Classroom, but then Classroom certainly dips into a lot of the other Google things. We have trained over 500 teachers in Google Classroom. So a lot of this we're going to be kind of sharing with you our experience and what we've discovered along the way. And sometimes even a course correction that we've had to make. We had one very large class in June, and we made some adjustments before we opened it up in July because of the things that we learned. But I do have a copy of the descriptor for this conversation we're going to be having. And again, we'll look at some more basic things, but we're also going to kick into some more deep uses, because we don't know what our year is going to look like. And the more we can use this tool that we're getting pretty good at, the better. So what to expect in this little bit of time. And I'm sorry, but I hope everybody's impressed with my stairwell on my leaping frog. I had fun.
I love him.
So the first thing I want to do is put out a Zoom poll, and it's just going to ask you about your experience with Google Classroom, just so we get a sense of where you're coming from. I'll give you a minute to pop a vote into there. We should be getting about 39 coming in, maybe 35 by the time you take Tracy, me, and maybe a few of you out. We thought this would help you see a Zoom poll, which is relatively new to me. I did my first one 2 or 3 days ago, as well as just give us a little bit of a foundation to figure out where to head our conversation. So we have 32 responses. I'm going to go ahead and end that. I think most of you had a chance to respond. I'll share those results just for a second, because it's interesting. About 12 of you are quite a bit, so 14 of you a little bit, and 7 of you not at all. Okay, so we'll kind of just go all around, which is fine. That's what we love doing. We love meeting you where you are and helping you get a little bit further in your knowledge. We're going to start with some starter tips. As I said, even though some of them seem very, very basic, there's really kind of some power to some of the things that we've discovered. Going one step deeper because of the things that we've learned, looking into integration, how you can take your Google Classroom into other tools and have them really collaborate and work nicely integrated with the Google Classroom and the tool that you're using. Google Classroom is not truly a learning management system. That would be more like a Canvas or a Schoology or Desire to Learn or WebCT back in my college days. Google Classroom's pretty good though for what you pay for it, which is nothing except your own data. That's another story. We'll take a look at the whys. A lot of what we share with you, we're going to express to you why we thought it was meaningful to share this with you in our conversation. Hopefully the objective that you take away from this is just a few aha moments. something that really just kind of hits you or like, oh, wow, I didn't know that, or that's really going to be relevant in my elementary fourth grade classroom or with my senior high students next year. As I said earlier, we don't know what the year is going to bring, but a lot of this use is still really valuable for in-person learning or flexible learning days. I think we've all kind of realized we're never going to see another snow day. So this is a lot of this stuff's going to stick even if we end up having a regular year. Fingers crossed.
Also, if we go through all of this, I mean, when we talk about Google and Google Classroom, there's so much that can be touched on. So if we're going through all of this and there's something else that you really like thought you were going to hear more about or you wanted to hear more about, please let us know, because like Brenda said, we have been doing different Google trainings really hardcore since about May. So it might be something that we do already have, you know, some PD that is available that if you wanted to take, maybe you didn't hear about it. Just let us know, because we're more than happy to help you get wherever you need to be with this, even if this isn't exactly what you were thinking it was going to be.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for that. All about customization. We really do try. Starting with a couple quick wins, and a lot of this has come from the work that we've done with teachers over the last couple months. A lot of Google Classroom's power is the integration of everything else that Google has in Drive, whether it be sheets, slides, documents, maybe Jamboards. We can get pretty fancy. We'll talk about some of those things. But one of the things that we had teachers do in a course that we did was the skills that would help them achieve their certification through Google for their educator, their Google Certified Educator course. And within that, we asked them to create some documents within the classroom. And we saw a lot coming in that were untitled. And it was just one of those things that we looked at. We're like, okay, that's really going to be a nightmare in your Drive if that's not a habit you can just kind of break. We understand that through the lens of the course, it probably didn't seem like that big of a deal, but it just seemed like one of those bad habits that we need to address right away. Because I don't know about you guys, how much you use Google and Drive, but no matter how hard I work to keep my Google Drive organized, it's just not happening, especially with a bunch of classrooms, but that's a whole other story. So we just thought we'd start with, please name your Google Docs, whether you're talking about Classroom or not.
We also found out it's helpful to give them a unique name, because I named something Google. That doesn't go so well when you go to do a search. Lots comes up. So it also helps to find something that's fairly unique to that document.
Yeah, so that's a general Drive or / Google tip, but in the classroom, it's even more important. And again, a lot of what we speak with you about is also relevant for students to know. You don't want students having untitled documents any more than you want for your own. Something else that we discovered is that when you create documents within Classroom, it makes it really a lot smoother to organize, because those files stay right in your Drive folder that belongs to that specific classroom. And you can also tell Classroom to create student copies. So each student gets a copy of something that you want them to do and turn back into you. One of the strategies I saw with my own 13-year-olds remote learning back in the spring was access to a document that each student then had to request edit access. So the teacher was getting 30 emails back that the students needed edit access. They were all on the same document. So just a tip, but a workflow thing that if you don't kind of see that that's an option and how well that works, you could end up in just kind of a logistical nightmare in your Drive. Another tip that we've discovered, and we haven't done a whole lot of this, is, and maybe we've talked about it, when you have instructions for what you want your students to do, it seems automatic to put that in your classroom. As far as your students are looking at their classroom, they're looking at the classwork, and they see everything that they need to do right in that assignment. It seems like it's a little bit better to put those on a document, especially if you have multiple classrooms using that same document, because that way you don't have to change it multiple times. And if there's anything in here that you'd like us to show you later on, we're happy to. We just wanted to start with kind of know that these things are possible, and we can go deeper either afterward or even another day. We're happy to do that with you.
It's also kind of like when you give instructions in the class, in your actual face-to-face classroom, you still put them on your on the assignment so they can see and go back to and have it with them at all times. It's kind of the same thing. It's great to have it in classroom, but it's better to have it on the document also, same as if you were face to face.
The updates that come through the Google ecosystem right now, and especially over the summer, are just really game changing. We are finding about things every day. So my professional learning option for what Google adds is Twitter. Other social media, there are lots of ways to learn how they're making changes. Sometimes they make changes that we don't really care for at first, but then we figure out why. Sometimes we don't like the changes and we're still not used to it. Speaking of one particular thing, but we'll get there. So updates are really important, especially if you're interacting with students in the fall and you're telling them to do it this way. And here you find out that that's not even how you do it anymore. So don't let that scare you because that could be a little intimidating, but the updates are helpful. We have really found that having your Google profile be a picture is really, really, it really helps. It doesn't actually have to be your personal picture, although it's nice. But being that anonymous egg person, and if you have a bunch of students as anonymous eggs, makes it a lot harder to keep track of the work, especially when you're operating with so many kids in so many different ways. So I just pulled an image of a couple classrooms that we work with. One was the level 1 where people were relatively new to the system, and we didn't really go down the road of having them put their picture in. And then we do a more deep dive into some of these skills, and we encourage them as an assignment to put their picture on. And it's really helpful for us. So you can see there, we have a picture of kind of the contrast, the mystery students and what's much better.
It's also helpful if you use more than one Google account on your computer. So every once in a while, mine will kick over to my personal Gmail. And the only reason I know is because I have two different pictures. So I know which one is my IU8 account and which one's my personal account. So if you're sharing multiple devices, or if your students are sharing like one device with multiple people, that would be a good way for them to not get lost also.
It's neat too, because as we look down through the Zoom, that's Zoom, sorry, I'm changing systems. This is Zoom, not Meet. If we were in Meet, we would be seeing your picture if you had a Google picture. So it really just ties together very nicely. Thinking a little bit about the actual ecosystem of Google Classroom, a lot of teachers, we found as we work with them through the spring and just weren't familiar with it, which is fine. We were in person for the longest time, and there wasn't a whole lot of need for using Google Classroom. But as we see it, we're seeing that it's good to explain the difference between stream and classwork. And I have a visual on there. What the purpose of the stream is. Putting class assignments into stream gets really confusing for students because there's not the organizational ability, and it just doesn't have quite that same format as it does if you're over in classwork, which we'll talk about next. Stream is really just for announcements, things one-way material that you just want them to see something. You don't care if they do anything with it. You maybe don't even care if they look at it. But it's just maybe just a check-in. We've been in our stream and just said, hello, we're out here. If you need any help, we're on Hangouts. So we just find that that's beneficial because there's no organization. When teachers were putting 100 assignments in the stream without putting them in classwork, students were just getting lost if they weren't keeping up, or even if they were.
You also can't organize by topic in the stream too, which makes it a little more confusing for the students.
We also found that a classroom setting that has been beneficial is hiding the notifications of classwork on your stream, because it looked like an announcement, but it was really it was not clear to students that that was something they needed to be doing over in classwork. We have personally found it best to hide that notification. It's a personal preference, but we found that more confusing even for us as facilitators if we were seeing assignments notified about in the stream.
One of the districts we spoke to said that that was one of the parents' issues also, because every time you create an assignment in classwork, it will pop up in the stream that an assignment had just been created. And so parents were getting confused about what was going on because, I mean, they're new to it too, and they weren't understanding the difference between the two. So turning that off was very, very helpful.
The one thing that you can do on stream is move things to the top. So if you have something that's really important, you want it to stay at the top of announcements. There's some better ways to do that in Classwork, which we'll talk about here in a second, but you can keep an eye on that and keep bumping it back to the top. We're just going to take a 2-minute pause. So what questions can we answer? What if you would like to open a tab on your browser and do something that we talked about, if you'd like to give us some feedback of something you didn't know or something you'd like to know more about.
Anything that anybody had a struggle with that maybe they just would like a little answer to, any complications in creating yours now?
I don't know if I want the music. Yeah, I'm turning the music off. If I turn it down, then I won't hear you. So that seemed like a good idea.
You put a message in the stream, does it show up in the Classwork tab? No, it does not. It only works the other way around. It's only if you put it in Classwork, it shows up on the stream, but not vice versa. Good question.
Yeah, very good question.
How did you make your Zoom poll, Bren?
Oh, that is an excellent question. And I didn't know this until 3 days ago. In settings, so like you have to be logged into Zoom and set that up in your Zoom settings ahead of time, not in the middle of your Zoom. Fortunately, somebody told me that before I tried to run a Zoom and run a poll, but good question. It's pretty neat too, because I was thinking of a lot of different ways we could have that integrated into the Google Slides, and that would have been good too. But for this, I just thought, well, we'll just throw it in the poll. So,
when you do a poll, do you see who answers what?
You can set it as anonymous. I do not have this one set as anonymous, but I actually do not know. I don't know if it's back in my account. I don't know. Chris, I think you're on, Chris. Can you answer that? Can you see who's answering your polls? Not to put you on the spot, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. If you log into your Zoom account, you can see who answered your polls and what the answers were.
Gotcha.
That might only be if you have a paid account. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
How to hide assignments after the deadline without removing the assignments. What do you mean by hiding them? Sorry, just a little more clarification. You want them to not be able to access them, or do you want them to be?
I had students doing all the assignments like I have been using Google Classroom before COVID.
Okay.
And since they could see it, they were doing like first 9-week assignments. They go back and see there are some assignments, and because they don't see grade, because we started putting grades for the COVID, and I actually had to remove assignments because they could still see it. So I was wondering whether we can just hide previous assignments.
What if you, I think maybe if you associate a date with that. I took a note, Malika, we'll check into that. That's an excellent question. We haven't done that. We don't typically have items that are tied to any sort of date, but that's an excellent question for your classroom workflow. We'll check into that and get back to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
An itinerant teacher in early intervention, do you think Google Classroom is practical and would work in this age group? Can you give me a more specific, when you say early intervention, can you give me a more specific age group?
So I work preschool, 3 through 5-year-olds.
Preschool
3. I can take that one. I think it's going to be challenging with kids that young. It's going to depend on the ability of the parents to work with them. If you have it very much set up for them to maybe use the app and take pictures of things in their class, like based on your learners, I don't know how independent they would be on Classroom. I would suggest Seesaw, I think, over Google Classroom, but even that, at that age and early intervention, there's going to need to be a lot of parental involvement.
That's kind of what I figured. I just kind of wanted to learn more about Google Classroom and explore the options of it.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, there's still some value there if that's where your comfort zone is, but I think Seesaw's probably a little bit more appropriate for learners that young.
Thank you.
Good question. I don't have the
Bryn,
chat open. Go ahead.
I do. Bryn, we have found that we put ourselves in using our personal Gmail accounts in order to see it from the student view. There is not like a student view button like with some traditional LMSs. So we just put ourselves in using our personal account so we can see what it looks like from the student perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
I tried doing that, but it said it needed to be like a school web address. Maybe
That's
there's-
actually on
Yeah.
a later slide, but we can certainly address that. What we
Okay.
have found in that
Yeah.
case is either you can request your domain administrator make a change if they don't want to, which they may not for security reasons. We have found that maybe a co-teacher could be a student in your classroom, or I've heard of some teachers having their aides be a student in the classroom. So
Or sometimes in an effort to not open up the domain, they'll actually just give you like a fake email address that you can use as a student.
Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome. Oh, sorry, I changed. We're not ready to change yet.
Does anyone have a Google Classroom set up that I could explore? Yes. And somebody else said sure. And yes, we're happy to throw you in one too. So
Yeah, we have like about 40 ones open right now.
yeah.
So we're always happy to share. That's an excellent. Sometimes it is really nice to see one in action.
Is there a specific, I'm sorry, I don't know what grade level or subject you are teaching.
I'm special ed 18 to 21, but I feel like we're learning like so much about Google Classroom, but we have never used it with our population, never put it into action, never. And like I feel like we can learn it inside and out, but until we actually like I don't even know what a lesson looks like in Google, if that makes sense. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're happy to go through some of that with you.
okay.
Sure.
Me too, please, since
Yeah,
I would like to also.
Classroom is really just kind of a bucket, and it depends on what you put in it. You can get super crazy fancy and have it almost be an LMS. You can have it just be pushing out some YouTube videos and then gathering through Google Meet with your students to talk about what they learned about the zoo video. I mean, you can really make it as deep or as whatever your students need.
Yes, you can make a sample student but you would need your domain, your tech administrator to create that sample student for you if you can't do a Gmail account.
Yeah, we have found that too. We're fortunate that we could easily enter, but we don't interact with young kids, so it's a little bit different with our settings. So a few things about, I don't want to rush. Is there anything else in the chat?
Nope, I think we're good.
A little bit about Classwork. When you create a Classwork, you have all those options. I just grabbed a screenshot over there on the right for creating, and we really just wanted to call your attention to making sure you use topics. It's really easy to get excited about all the material that you're putting into Classroom and not realize that the organization is really important. Thinking about what makes sense. What makes sense for a first grade teacher might not be what makes sense for somebody who's teaching 11th graders. We've talked to some schools who are making recommendations to how that's set up. Sometimes it's by date. So you want your 4th grade students to do these 4 topics sometime throughout the week of September whatever to September whatever. You might want your high school algebra students to interact differently with your topic. So it's a personal decision, but it's smart to really give some thought into that. Also, scheduling things. You can schedule assignments to go live at a certain time. So if you put your materials in on Monday and you'd like to see an assignment go live on Wednesday morning, you can schedule that to occur like that. The resource materials and the topics it's just a suggestion I read not too long ago that in your Classwork tab, which is what we're picturing on here, it's sometimes helpful to put an item called resource materials as either a first topic or an item that isn't even in a topic. That way it stays at the top. So if you all the time have your students accessing some sort of math program, maybe you want that link to be up there. Maybe you have a document that includes your Bitmoji classroom that you want to link there at the top. So things that you really just want to stay up there for your kids, always to know that that's front and center.
Yeah, we were actually talking to the librarians yesterday too about having like a library resource tab in each of their teachers' Google Classrooms. So that way it's always available to the students through the teachers' Google Classrooms. And it'll link them out to certain resources in the library. Or if there's a website or if you have a Google site of your own that you want parents to be able to easily access, they can jump on through their kids' Google Classroom. Things like that. That resource is really helpful.
One thing I wanted to point out is that the items I have over here on the right are the materials that can be added, the items, or the assets, the assignments, the quiz assignments. And then when we go to the next slide, we're thinking about, again, we're back to that beyond, we're getting into the beyond, thinking about what you can add to your classroom that maybe isn't quite so basic. Something really great to think about is screencasting videos. I have the example there as Screencastify, but there are some really, really great ones out there, other ones. One we've seen a lot about recently is Loom. And I know I think there's like a ScreenFlow, and there are lots of different ones. I have found that Screencastify is nice because when you make the screencast, it automatically saves in your Google Drive, and you can really easily be in your classroom building your material and going out and finding it from your drive. So it's just, for me, I found it great. The free version does have a 5-minute limit, but typically I try to keep my videos really short anyway, so that has not been a challenge for the uses that I have done. Screencasting is quite a skill. Even if I think I'm 100% prepared, I still record myself 73 times.
We were talking about that a little bit yesterday also, about the fact that you can't be a perfectionist when it comes to screencasting, because you will continuously do the same one repeatedly. You have to say, okay, I'm okay with that flaw, and move on, because you will not get anywhere if you don't.
And these do not have to be fancy. If you've never, if the thought of making your own video totally is a lot to you, it doesn't have to be crazy. It can be just your screen. It can be just you speaking. The kids want to see you, and we think about that a lot as we know that we might not physically be with our kids as much as we want to be possibly this year. The extension is really handy, because if you're familiar with Chrome and how extensions work, it's really a quick click to give you access to start recording your screen and doing the things that make it a pretty good screencast. Recording, editing, all of that is just, it's something to think about if you're ready for your classroom to be a little bit more than the basics that are automatically available to you. Getting even a little bit fancier, integrated tools are out there that suck right into your Google Classroom really nicely. I have a link on the slide deck there of a blogger that I follow who has an article about 70 tools that integrate directly into Classroom. What we have found is that the definition of integration really varies. Some of them, for example, Edpuzzle, it allows you to be in Edpuzzle, tell Edpuzzle to go find your kids out of your Google Classroom, pull them in to Edpuzzle, and pay attention to their grades. So to back up, have a second. Edpuzzle is a tool that allows you to show a student video, maybe a 3 or 4 minute video, whether it be something you created or something you found on YouTube. And there are stopping points along the way where you're asking them a question. So it's much more than a passive viewing of a short video. The students need to pay attention and then answer, what makes chlorophyll green? That was probably a dumb example, but some sort of example about the material that you're asking. So they have to be paying attention, they need to respond. And Edpuzzle will capture their responses and automatically grade it, and then push those grades back over into Google Classroom. So it's really a tight connection. It's pretty fantastic.
CK12 offers the same type of integration. It takes them out to, they don't need a separate login, but it will take them out to the CK12 textbook or flexbook, and they can do the practice activities, and they can do the adaptive practice, whatever's in the CK12 flexbook, and that connects to your Google Classroom gradebook. So it's all reported. You don't have to go in and take 2 separate things. It's in there, and it transfers over for you, which is fantastic.
I put Discovery Education on there because a lot of the school districts in the IU have a subscription to that service, which has a lot of really good high quality instructional videos and other materials. We find that if the students access Discovery through Google Classroom, they still need to log in. So unless you have it set up with your district with a single sign-on, so by that I mean the students are already logged into Discovery by nature of their Google login, it's a little bit harder because the students then do have to have an account. But there's been a lot of conversation that I've had in the last few weeks about getting that single sign-on up and running. So that's something to keep in mind if you'd like to have your students interact with that sort of tool.
Bren, we have a couple questions in the
Sure.
chat.
Sure.
How do you get Edpuzzle grade into Google Classroom?
It's,
I know that I tried once. There's two ways you can do it, I think.
it's automagical.
Yeah.
If you have your Edpuzzle set up and you suck in your classroom students and they do the work, it automatically pushes back over into Classroom if you have it set up correctly. And if this is something that we can convene again about, we're glad to do so. Maybe that's something that we can do as a follow-up to this.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that Brenda and I have found over the last, in creating this, that we would love to do follow-ups with that we think will be very helpful. Also, is there a program that can convert a worksheet into an interactive Google worksheet rather than typing the worksheet into Google? We touch on that a little bit here, a little bit later.
Yep.
So we will circle back around to that. Lynette, I do have it synced that way, but the grades never show up. Lynette, back in, I believe, May, I was messing around, and for some reason, the one way I had it was not doing it, but then I went in and did something like it, as Brenda said, it's a weird thing, because I was like, why isn't this working? But it was just some weird little clip that I had to do something different. So it might just be a quick miss that you didn't know was there. That's what it was for me. So yeah. And again, we're happy to sit with you and figure that out.
Yeah, when I got it working, I was like jumping. I was like that little frog jump up the stairs. I was excited. Yeah. I'm like, it works.
Yeah.
So we put Flipgrid on there too, just because Flipgrid is such a fantastic way, a tool that allows you to take really easy videos and have students respond to you in really easy videos. The video world right now has just exploded. I don't know how many of you have teens that live on TikTok, but I fear that's all my teenager has done since March. A little scary, so don't judge my parenting, but videos are just really a thing that kids do, and it's a really good way. Flipgrid has resources. They have created projects that you can identify that are beneficial to support your instruction, and it works really nicely in Classroom as well. So I wanted to throw that on there. Some of the items that we see on the list of 70, they're great, but I'm not really sure how they're considered integrated. They're just kind of links out like that. Like one example is American Museum of Natural History. Fantastic content, but I'm not really sure what equates it to be an integration rather than just linking out of Google Classroom and then seeing the material and coming back and doing something in the classroom. So it really depends on the tool that the classroom links out to, but that's a great article to take a look at. Something that's pretty fantastic in Classroom that we have experimented with some is that you can differentiate by providing different assignments to students. Tracy, you look very excited. Would you like to weigh in on this?
I am, because one of the classrooms that we're currently working with a group of teachers in, there was one teacher in particular that we were going back and forth about a certain resource. And I was able to grab that resource, put it in, and just assign it just to her because nobody else would have known what I was talking about. So it is awesome because you can just click on that students, and if you have 3 students that you might need a little more practice, you can throw something in there and just assign it to those 3 students, and nobody else knows that it's only going to those 3 students. It's fantastic. It's a great way to be able to individualize and personalize for different students, in my opinion.
We had a couple people ask us, will the other kids see that there's an assignment specifically for another student? And we experimented in several different ways. It is completely invisible to the other students who are not receiving that assignment. So differentiation is it's a pretty powerful technique to kind of get used to being available.
Can you push the individual assignments to Canvas? There is not a connection between Google Classroom and Canvas. However, your Google Drive, you can embed your Google documents into Canvas in a different way.
Something else coming out too, and I've only seen bits and pieces of this, is Google is creating a Google assignment tool that talks better into other LMSs. This is new information. I think I read about it on Twitter like this morning. So don't ask too many questions. But for those of you using other systems, that might be something to keep an eye on, because even if you're using other systems, there's a lot of value in Classroom, or excuse me, in Google, even if it's not Classroom.
Absolutely.
So this addresses one of the questions that came back earlier. Again, my own teen had Google Classroom work in the spring, and I found it really fascinating, the PDFs that were shared, and she wasn't sure what to do with the PDF because by nature, PDF is a very flat document. There's not a whole lot of interaction you can do. Now, there are some PDFs you can fill in. I've never had a whole lot of luck with that. I feel like things just kind of move all over the place. But we have found, we saw an article that is pretty good. I have the link to the full demo on the slide. We put that on there for your use. But essentially what that has you do is use an image file of the document, put it as a background on a Google slide, and then put text answer boxes over top that the students can then have their own copy of, fill in their answers, and send back to you. Now, that's a process that I just went through very quickly verbally, but that video shows you how to do that. I experimented with that on the math assignment that my daughter received. I think what I did was took a screenshot picture of it, saved it as the image, put it on the slide deck, had her do her work over top, and submitted it back to the teacher. The teacher was probably like, what the heck? Like, what's going on here? But we do find that with teachers who want to see that sort of work coming back into them, that's pretty neat. You might have to see the full video to kind of follow what we're saying, but that's the gist of it. By putting the file as an image on the background of the slide, the kids aren't going to accidentally move it all around. It's just going to sit there on the background.
I actually found out too, if you have an iPhone, your Notes app can actually be a scanner. I don't know if anybody else knew that already, but I found that out when I was doing my taxes and had to scan something. If you go to the Notes, it can turn into a scanner and it will just scan your file for you, which is fantastic.
I wonder if Android
and that way
has,
you can get it into
I think Android has something similar.
Probably.
I used it not too long ago too. It was pretty handy. We have lots of workarounds we figured out.
Yeah.
And this is actually another one.
Bonnie put a link to Cami in there.
Oh, fantastic. I've heard a lot about Cami. I have not done a whole lot with it. Another tool that we've seen for annotating over top of work is Lumin, L-U-M-I-N. I haven't experimented with that, but that's another one. Cami, I'm glad you brought that up, Bonnie. I've heard a lot about Cami, so I need to look at that a little bit more closely.
Thank you, Ryan. Jotnot, J-O-T-N-O-T, is a great app. It allows you to insert a digital signature.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
That could be handy if you want something else that came up in conversation with some teachers was getting permission slip type items back from parents, especially if you're not able to send it home with the student and get it back. So that's a good one. I like it. We found too, when we were running multiple active classrooms, it was really kind of a challenge to look at the materials that came into us 3 days ago as opposed to the ones that came in 10 minutes ago. Now, it really wasn't that big of a deal, but if somebody submitted things a little bit ago, we kind of wanted to keep that flow going. We've determined that when you're looking at an assignment as a teacher in Google Classroom, you can most easily access the classroom work folder with that little visual that I have the blue circle around. That icon will take you directly to your drive and all your files that are in this classroom. At that point, you can then sort your drive by last modified if you want to see who submitted something. So the visual I have on there, I would probably go to the bottom of that list because something came in on the other way around, sorry. I would look at the July 13th item that came in and then look at the 17th item if I wanted to pay attention to that. Depending on your workflow, that might not be a huge benefit, but we found that it was handy to just kind of know how Classroom and Drive work together and how to most efficiently work through the assignments that you wanted to take a look at. Something that we find is just kind of not thought about is the Google Classroom app. Maybe you're using it and your students are using it and you're completely on board with this, but sometimes we mention the app to people and they're like, oh, It's really good. Back in the spring, I was having a fit because my own teen was never on her Chromebook, and I didn't think she was doing any work. Well, here she told me she was doing it all on her phone. Not totally convinced, but that was the line she gave me. But it's really pretty interesting. I pulled a couple screenshots from my student view on my app on my phone that I have on there. The materials are that middle picture where you have like the introduction, you got the topics, everything is right there. It has the same dashboard as you have on your desktop or on your laptop. Over to the right is the work that the student can submit. So the power that I see in this, and this kind of circles back to the why, I had a conversation with a fellow parent back in the spring, and she said they spent forever trying to take a picture of her teen doing something, I think it was maybe phys ed related, and then uploading it to her Google Classroom, because they were taking the picture, saving it or emailing it to themselves, like it was this whole convoluted solution. And I said, well, did you consider maybe using the Classroom app? And she's like, oh, I don't know. So the visual I have on there is when students or their parents, especially if you have those younger learners or learners with more needs, can go into their work, pick a picture, pick a photo, or use a camera. So if we're thinking back about early learners, maybe you want a first grader to go somewhere in their house and take a picture of something that starts with a specific letter. They can do something like that really easily on the app, whereas on the computer version, it would take a little bit more effort. So you could have a balloon or a basset hound, I don't know. You might be, who knows what you might get. But so a lot of power, I think, in that app, especially for today's students, whether they be 4-year-olds or my 13-year-old. Have any of you used the app much, or had your students using it, or is it some kind of a new thought? Feel free to unmute.
This is Yvette. I actually use the app all the time whenever I was working. I wouldn't always be sitting at my computer, but I would have my iPad with me, and I would get kids' questions, and it was so much easier to respond to them because it was more mobile. And if I was doing laundry, it was sitting there right next to me. I didn't have to sit at the computer the whole time.
Is that a blessing or a curse, though? You kind of wonder sometimes, right?
I don't know. When you work 7 to 10 and everybody thinks you're not doing anything, you multitask. It's just
we all know
Absolutely.
better. We all know better what everybody was doing. But I just see some comments on there too. Suzanne, I think having multiple classrooms, that's wow. If you could have that through one classroom.
That's what I was just trying to look at different settings and different things to see if that was a possibility. Because you don't want them to be able to see each other's emails, I guess.
Right. Things. It's a confidentiality thing. When I see
absolutely.
Kids face to face, it's individual for the most part. And so whenever I have a Google Classroom, all the other classes, if I'm in Malika and I work together. So if I'm in Malika's class, I can, all those kids can see all the kids in their class. But it would be so fabulous if I could have a class and be able to hit it. But I checked settings last year. I looked. I just was curious if you guys knew anything.
You mean you don't like running 30 classrooms?
Oh, I did it.
For one student each? That's crazy.
Well, but here's the thing. If I was giving them all the same assignment, I could still go in, make one assignment, and then click, if I wanted to go to student A, B, C, and send it to them. And then make my other assignment, send it to that group. It just, the desktop or the initial page of my Google Classroom was very, very complicated.
Yes, your dashboard. Yeah. Because once you have them all established, it's easy to push stuff out, even announcements and things like that. I'm trying. I don't know. I just jumped over to my student view and I was looking from the student side, what you could do. I don't know.
I mean, I already have it set up, so I won't have that many to add to it this year. So it won't be as bad as setting it up. It took me a whole day to set it up last year, but
it does seem like there could be a more streamlined approach, but we'll have to get some thought to that and keep talking.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say they could change their names, so it wouldn't be their full name or their email or anything like that. It would just be a name, but that's still, I don't know if that would.
I feel like the
solve that
school would
problem.
have to do that, and that would be asking a lot.
Yeah, I think that would get messy.
Yeah.
We have had some questions about confidentiality, but they see, oh, I guess I see what you're saying. We'll have to give some thought to that.
Different. A regular classroom is different than mine.
Sure.
Mine, even a learning support classroom is different. You know, if you have a learning support math class, like they're going to see all of them, each other in there when they're in school. So that's not a problem. It's the fact that when I pull kids in face to face, it really is one-on-one.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so as a couple of you have already mentioned, the app is not just for students. I really found that being on the app, especially with questions, we had a lot of questions out there in our Google Classrooms over the last few months. And I found that using the app on my phone to respond when my husband had something dumb on TV, just really kind of made it nice. But again, you kind of wonder sometimes, okay, where do you draw the line and just turn it off? But it's really good to make sure the families know about the app too, especially for those younger ones. The older ones will probably figure it out, but the younger ones might need a little bit more guidance. So for additional interaction between the teachers and the students, we've talked about stream announcements. In the classrooms that we run, we try to make stream announcements at least every other day, just kind of keep that communication flow going. That's one thing that would, the way we looked at the differentiation picture, where you can send the same assignment to only a couple kids, you can also send the same stream assignment to multiple classrooms. So if that's not something you've experimented with, it might be helpful, especially, you know, if you have a lot of classrooms with a lot of the same material, you can send those announcements out kind of in bulk. That can be a good way to go. We use a lot of class comments. We typically leave it open, again, another setting for students to make class comments. You may not want to. We have adults and you have young kids, so that might be a setting that you can look at. And we can look at settings a little bit more carefully too if anybody has questions. Private comments saved our life. Private comments just was so helpful for us as we were facilitating hundreds of teachers and getting private comments back and forth. I don't know how in the world we would have kept track of the communication through the classrooms with that volume. But when we got an email ding that came right to us and it identified who it was, what classroom they were in, what assignment or question they were working in, and it took a click for us to get there and react, just private comments were fantastic. Your students probably aren't fantastic about checking their email. Maybe they are. I don't know. We're not finding so much that in my house, he emails like totally for old people, but we really find that those private comments are helpful for students.
The class comments too, one of the things that I just found out, and I'm not sure if this was just new to me, but you can actually mute a student. So if you want class comments to be open so they can kind of like help each other a little bit, not just rely on you, but you have, you know, Jack who's being, you know, a little more than he should be on your class comments, you can mute them and for a certain amount of time, which I think is great. And then they can still see their work and they can still do their work, but they can't respond and they can't contact anybody. Sometimes little Jack needs that.
I love the name you selected for that, I have to say. So we also put on there the value of the calendar. There's a calendar instance that is tied directly to your classroom. If you use a lot of due dates, it's really handy to use that and have your students get a grasp of the value of that, because they can look at that calendar. They all have access as students in your classroom. They can see that this algebra assignment is due on Friday the 27th. They can see kind of that flow and what's expected of them.
I would actually push that to like at the beginning of the week or even at the beginning of every day. Hey, make sure you check your Google Calendar today to see what all is expected of you. So they get into that habit of checking that and seeing what's there. It's also a great way if you are going to have some meetings set up, because you can put your Meet link in there and invite them. And so they can actually look at their Google Calendar Monday morning and go, oh, I need to meet with Brenda at 2:00 today for whatever, our check-in. And it's on there, and that's how they can get to the check-in. So that's a great way to kind of have that connection set up too.
Now, if students are in multiple Google Classrooms, they will have multiple calendars, but they can see them all at once. So if Google Calendar is not something you've experimented with too much, it's just there. I just see your question come in. It's just there. The calendar is just automatically included with your classroom. It will activate when you put due dates on assignments. Until you do that, it's not going to be very active. Yeah, Suzanne, that's an excellent, the to-do. In fact, we're going to talk about that again here shortly. One more thing to point out on the slide deck. When you provide comments and feedback to students in Google Classroom, it is all text-based, except if you use Emojipedia. So I love Emojipedia. I actually pinned it to my Chrome browser. It's always there. So you can go find a picture of something and copy it, and it will pull over just like you're copying capital letter D. It'll copy and paste that over, so you can put pictures like Taco Tuesday on your stream, and you can actually have a picture of a taco. That's a real life example. So
we may or may not have used that in our own Google Classroom.
I think I may have outed us. But anyway, it's just kind of something fun. It doesn't take any more time, and we loved Emojipedia.
One of the things that Brenda and I have been stressing is putting as much of you into your Google Classroom as you possibly can. Our Google Classroom banner is our Bitmoji Classroom with our faces. Anywhere that we can throw in our Bitmoji or the Flipgrid video of ourselves, more Brenda than me, anything like that, you cannot make yourself present enough in your classroom. They love to see that. They love when you give feedback and it has a little Bitmoji picture of yourself saying, good job. That's the connection that they can make to that classwork in that classroom. So as much as you can put yourself in there is a great way to get that connection going with those students, especially if we end up switching to a blended environment. You still want them to see you every day. And that's another big part of the feedback. You know, one of the things that we do when we provided feedback is comment too. Like I had them creating a Google Doc. If they added a picture of their dog, oh, your dog's so cute. And that'll start a conversation going. And that's where that relationship gets built and stays built when you get in there.
Yeah, we had quite the learning experience in June and July. We learned a lot about people's dogs, and people had babies and grandkids, and it was fascinating.
It's awesome. I loved it.
The other image I want to call your attention to on this slide is that view your work clipboard. When your students are logged in and they're looking at their dashboard, or if they're looking at their actual class, like I have the visual, that view your work is going to show them what they need to do, what has been assigned to them and they need to address, what has been turned in, what has been turned in and graded. You don't need 500 kids asking you if they've done all their work for the week. They kind of need to understand the tools available to them, like that view your work. We tried to model that as much as we could with our classrooms, but sometimes we just told them what they needed to do.
But in the modeling process, there were times where I would say, well, what does it say on your thing? you know?
Yeah, so something to consider with your usage of Classroom and your use of the Google ecosystem if you're not able to be with kids at some point. The Classroom Meet, or in Zoom now, Meet is very similar. The Meet has the ability to have its own dedicated address into your classroom. So if you're on your Google Classroom, there's an option that I have the picture on there, adding Meet to your classroom, basically like a phone number into your physical classroom. This is your Meet link. You can use that at any time throughout the course of the year. There are a lot of updates coming, including some things like some security, some more controls. So we use Zoom and Google Meet both. We still both prefer a Zoom a little bit more, but Meet is making progress. You can see there on the visual some of the things that they're adding. One of the things that a lot of people are really excited about is kind of blurring out background noise. So if you're sitting at your desk by a window and somebody's outside mowing, it'll kind of drown that out a little bit. So I haven't seen that in action, but I'm hearing that it's pretty interesting.
Or if there's roosters, is that?
Hey, I don't know if it would blur that out. It's more like a white noise that it seems to pull out from what I've read. Okay, but they're adding a collaborative whiteboard, because right now Zoom has a whiteboard, but Meet really doesn't. They are adding some security measures, because for a while there were concerns about students being able to get into Google Meets even if the teacher wasn't there to kind of like be the teacher that they were getting, but they're adding that in there. I'm just taking a look at that because a lot of these were just announced.
If you were in Amanda's math session earlier, she talked about whiteboard.fi, and I can't recommend that enough. I was so glad she mentioned that, because that's really a fantastic whiteboard that you can use, you can make it interactive for your classroom, and each student gets their own whiteboard, and so it can kind of individualize it. It's fantastic. Yes, okay.
Yeah, that was me saying yes. I accidentally said it twice. But yeah, Jamboard is being integrated into Meet. Since it's not live yet, I haven't practiced with it, or I haven't seen it, but it's going to be coming soon. Is it on that picture? I have my Zoom stuff over top of it. I think it
looks a collaborative whiteboard, it says, but I don't see the.
It is Jamboard.
Jamboard
So the other thing too is replacing backgrounds. If you're interacting with students at home, sometimes background is a concern. If that works well to blur that out. We were speaking earlier before we got started too much that we have not had a whole lot of luck with Zoom backgrounds. I don't know if Meets are going to be better, or if maybe it's just a computer thing, I don't know. But that might be handy when you don't know what's going on in students' home, to kind of have a little bit of a blur behind. A lot of good things coming to Meet. We wanted to put on one slide deck for some extra guidance about students and parents. We talked about the view your work, but just another reminder, and this came up when we were chatting too. There's going to be a new to-do view on classes. In the dashboard, I don't have a great picture of it because I don't have it yet, but it's supposedly coming out very soon, where the students see what they need to do, what has been reviewed. It's similar to what we see on the view your work, but it's going to be much more of a to-do type visual. Well, I saw a quick video about what it's going to look like, and I think it's really going to be helpful. And ideally, we are with kids at least for a little while here, so we have that opportunity to physically be with them and show them some of these little things that will help them if we are then having to be offsite. So that to-do view that was mentioned even earlier in the chat is going to be getting better.
Yeah, that was a conversation that we had with one of the districts that we were working with too. Just like Brenda and I, when we first started, we're not exactly sure what you know and what you don't know. I highly recommend take some time with your students, even make like a fun game out of Learning Classroom and explaining all of these little individual things that are there and available to them. I think sometimes we take for granted that, oh, well, they've been using Google Classroom. That's not always necessarily the case, or they might have been supposed to be using it, but we're not sure. And again, just learning stuff as a student, like Brenda and I go in as students and just play around to find stuff out. Not every student's going to do that. So it might be helpful to make sure that they understand it from the student side also. And there's a video that I dropped in there that is a parent introduction to Google Classroom. So that's a fantastic resource if you want to put, if you're starting out with a resource tab topic in your classroom, that's something that you could put in there for parents and some guidance that you could push towards them.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at our time. I'm gonna close my screen out here and grab the code. And then Trace, if you want to go to the next slide, I think we're pretty much wrapped up, but in interest of everybody's time, I do want to grab that code that I know that you need for the submission.
It is, it's still in parents guidance. I can't switch slides.
No, you can't. You're right. Sorry.
But if you want to put it on Tracy's board.
Got too many tabs open, which I said I'm not going to have too many tabs open because I'm just going to stop my share here for a second and go find that code. I very strategically put that on a slide deck, and now I got to go find it. Okay, I'm going to pop that in there, and then I'll go ahead and share again, and we'll just finish up for a few minutes. But if you need to go, please understand that we know that it is. Yeah. You all have access to that slide deck though, so if you need to duck out and you still want to come back in and see some of the other things we have in there, we're certainly really happy for you to do so for that.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, Brian, and go.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep, talk about.
Perfect.
So what you're hopefully seeing now says Tracy's Google Classroom cheat sheet. And if you know me, you know that is not my Bitmoji. So unfortunately, even though it has my name at the top, I can't take credit. But this is a fantastic literally cheat sheet that you can use. And when you click on it, it takes you to creating a class, and then it'll show you what now my computer's being slow. But it takes you just a quick screencast of how to create a class. So it's a great little cheat sheet that you can use, adding an assignment, adding question discussion, adding emoji, as we've talked about before, turning on guardian summaries, and inviting parents. That's a big one. I know a lot of people were asking questions about that. And Bren, you probably like this one, using data validation to prevent students from jumping into a quiz. I don't know if you've used Google Forms, but you can actually lock a Google form now, and so the students can't go into another browser. So this is just a great little cheat sheet of different things. They're real quick little screencastifies that'll show you how to do it and what to do.
I'm going to find that link, so I will have it here in 1 second.
And now we are on who to watch. There are some, as Brenda suggested on Twitter, there are a couple people that we specifically follow because they're usually putting out some new and improved stuff. If you're not a Twitter person, Facebook has a lot of groups also. I would caution though, I Googled Google Classroom in Facebook, and there's a lot of sites, and the one specifically that I looked at might have just been a bad one for me to look at, because there was a lot more questions than answers, it seemed like. So I would just, go through and check different Facebook groups and see which one actually looks like it's going to provide you with the most information. But as far as Twitter goes, it's usually pretty right there. Who to watch here is Casey Bell and Brenda. Can you tell them about Casey Bell?
Yeah, just a blogger and just kind of like somebody who works a lot with Google. She has blogs and a Twitter presence and a YouTube channel and a podcast and just absolutely everything you can possibly imagine. The link to her site is her name on there. And then we also pulled out just one example of some work she put out there. Her work is fantastic. I find her website a little bit distracting because there's like stuff happening everywhere, but it's still a good kind of resource to see what jumps out at you.
I would recommend creating a folder in your Google Drive that says, like resources or Twitter or whatever. And then anytime you see, for example, she has do not request access, click here to make a copy. Anytime you see a Google document or a Google Slides that you like, don't request access because you're not going to get it, because it's usually that master copy. Always just make a habit of going up and clicking file and make a copy for yourself. And then you can put it into that folder, create a folder for yourself. So, like maybe online resources, and push it out into that folder. And then you can try and organize that later if you want to. But I get a lot of requests for access to master documents, and I'm always, hey, please make a copy. So if you just get into the habit of making a copy of everything for yourself, that's a great way to keep it organized in your files and not lose it. Because if you request access, if they do give you access, it might not be for a couple weeks, and then you're like, what am I looking at? You have no idea at that point. Who to watch? Eric Kurtz. Brendan and I had the benefits of going and seeing him actually speak, and he was phenomenal.
And this is more of an elementary example. We just pulled, again, the link to his name. His name links out to his website, but he has a blog and Twitter and YouTube, and we just kind of put some things on there that you can dive into to see what might be beneficial for you. And then we picked Jake Miller too. This is where I was mentioning Screencast, but Luma is also good. And we've actually gotten some questions from teachers about which is better. Just a preference. And as I mentioned on the screencasting slide, there are also some other ones out there. This is just, again, one thing that I highlighted from Jake's work.
Well, one of the big things that I believe, and I apologize, but I believe it was Ryan pointed out, is that Loom has the unlimited video length, where Screencastify only has that 5 minutes. So it's one of the differences.
So just thinking about now what. The first now what is the link to the Act 48 form as well as the actual code are over there in the chat. I was so proud of myself for finding that code, but I did not think to pull the link. So thank you for those of you who swooped in and helped out. We do have some professional learning courses that we provide around Google. We have a level 1 certification course, and we also have a blended learning with Google, and we have a blended learning specifically for teachers of young learners too. And we're always looking to customize and kind of like rearrange the work that we're doing. So please just get in touch with us or talk to your administration if there's something that you think that the work that we do can benefit, you know, a bigger group. All the tools we mentioned, most of them have really fantastic like ambassador programs or YouTube channels or anything like that. You can always learn more about Flipgrid, Edpuzzle, any of those. There are tons of webinars out there. I'm a big fan of Twitter, social media. That's just what I do. I learn so much on Twitter. Now it's a little bit crazy right now, but I try to not pay attention to some of the non-educational things. Don't always do a good job, but there's so much more that we can do and we can learn.
And I'm a lurker on Twitter, I'm not going to lie. I look at Twitter all the time. I have posted maybe like 6 things in 3 years, but I'm a lurker. I use it just to look at what other people are using and doing and talking about it.
Another social media place that I've heard of recently sharing good stuff is Reddit. I've heard of Reddit, but I have not seen a whole lot of learning on there. So we'll see. I might have to check that out because I did see some good things.
Get into some weird stuff too, though.
Yes, yes, that is the understatement of the day for sure. Yeah. But anyway, so lots of now what's, lots of where we can go from there. And then in wrap up, we just thank you for joining us. We hope that you have a couple different takeaways. I have a sign language thank you on there.
Okay, I didn't know if it was going to start talking. I was like, oh no.
No, it's a silent video. It's thank you. And we also wanted to put a shout out there to Slides Mania because Slides Mania has some fantastic visual slide decks as well as some like learning choice boards that are already created for you. So check that out. There's a lot of additional learning. So okay,
we can't emphasize enough. If there's something you want, try Googling it first because there are so many templates. I was looking the other day, I found a kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade hyperdocs that were fantastic to try and organize your Google Classroom if you're with younger learners. And there's just so much that is already, so many templates that are already out there and available. So if you are looking for something, it's probably available and you can save yourself a little bit of time by just Google.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so thank you all so much. We really appreciate you spending an hour plus-ish with us. And please feel free to use that document. Be in touch with us if there's anything else. I did jot some notes, and we know who you are, and we will circle back on a couple different things. And we just want to learn right alongside you because we've got our hands full here, period.
And we're happy to stay and look at anything. If you have questions and you would like for us to jump into Google Classroom and show you anything, we're happy to do that too.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Suzanne, Sandra, Jen. Appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording.